Tonight, we step away from the chaos of the modern world and into the gentle embrace of Regency England, where love blooms quietly in drawing rooms and whispered conversations carry more weight than shouted declarations. This isn't just another bedtime story. This is a journey into the tender romance between Daphne Bridgerton and Simon Basset, the Duke of Hastings, a tale crafted specifically to ease your mind and guide you into peaceful slumber. Before you settle deeper into your pillows, take a moment to like this video if you enjoy these soothing stories, and subscribe if you'd like more gentle tales to help you drift off to sleep. Let me know in the comments which Bridgerton character you'd like to hear about next, and what time it is where you're listening. There's something magical about knowing we're all sharing this quiet moment together, no matter where we are in the world. What makes this story special isn't just the romance, though there's plenty of that. It's the way love grows slowly, naturally, like morning light creeping across a garden. Daphne and Simon's story reminds us that the most beautiful relationships often begin as something else entirely. A practical arrangement, a mutual benefit, a simple agreement between two people who think they understand exactly what they want from life. The beauty of their tale lies not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the small moments, the way Simon's carefully constructed walls begin to crumble when Daphne smiles, how her genuine warmth melts the ice he's spent years building around his heart. Tonight, we'll explore not just their love story, but the gentle transformation of two souls finding exactly what they never knew they needed. So let your breathing slow, allow your shoulders to relax, and prepare to be transported to a world where love conquers not through force, but through the quiet persistence of two hearts learning to trust. Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let them rest softly as we begin our journey into the Bridgerton world, where even the most guarded hearts can learn to love again. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Bridgerton House, casting golden rectangles across the polished wooden floors. Daphne stood before her mirror, watching as her lady's maid arranged her dark hair into an elegant style that would be appropriate for her morning walk in Hyde Park. The reflection staring back at her showed a young woman on the cusp of her debut season, though her eyes held a wisdom that suggested she understood far more about the world than most girls her age. She had always been different from her brothers, quieter in her observations, but no less determined. Where Anthony charged forward with the force of a cavalry regiment, Daphne moved through life with the grace of a dancer, each step calculated, yet appearing effortless. This particular morning felt different somehow, though she couldn't quite place why. Perhaps it was the way the light seemed softer, or how the usual sounds of London seemed muffled, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Her mother, Violet, had been discussing the upcoming season with increasing frequency, and Daphne knew that soon she would be thrust into the elaborate dance of courtship that defined high society. The thought didn't fill her with the excitement that might be expected. Instead, she felt a curious mixture of anticipation and reservation, as if she were standing at the edge of a vast ocean, knowing she must dive in, but uncertain of the currents beneath the surface. Across London, in the considerably grander surroundings of Hastings House, Simon Basset was engaged in his own morning ritual, though his was far less concerned with appearance and far more focused on the stack of correspondence that seemed to multiply overnight. The Duke of Hastings had returned to England reluctantly, drawn back by duties he'd spent years avoiding and responsibilities he'd never wanted to claim. His study was a testament to organized efficiency. Every book in its place, every paper filed according to a system that would have impressed the most meticulous of secretaries. Yet, for all its order, the room felt cold, lacking the warmth that comes from being truly lived in, rather than simply occupied. Simon preferred it this way. Emotional attachments led to complications, and complications led to the kind of pain he'd sworn never to experience again. He paused in his reading, a letter from his estate manager in his hands, and found his thoughts drifting to the evening ahead. Lady Danbury had insisted he attend the Trowbridge ball, and while he respected his godmother too much to refuse outright, he dreaded the prospect of being paraded before yet another collection of marriage-minded mothers and their hopeful daughters. The irony wasn't lost on him that his very attempts to avoid matrimony only seemed to make him more appealing to those seeking it. The afternoon brought both Daphne and Simon to the same park, though by different paths and for different reasons. Daphne walked with purpose, her stride confident despite the restrictive nature of her walking dress. She had always found solace in movement, in the simple act of placing one foot in front of the other, while her mind worked through whatever challenges the day had presented. She wasn't entirely alone, of course. Her maid trailed at a respectable distance, and she'd arranged to meet her friend Penelope near the Serpentine. But for these few minutes, she could pretend she was simply a young woman taking the air, not a debutante being prepared for market like a prized heifer. The thought made her smile, though not with particular humor. Simon's presence in the park was less voluntary. His morning ride had been interrupted by an encounter with Lord Burbrook, a man whose persistence in pursuing various business arrangements was matched only by his complete inability to take a hint. Escape had seemed the better part of valor, and the park offered both distance and the sort of public setting that discouraged lengthy conversation about investments and opportunities. He guided his horse along the riding path with the same careful control he applied to every aspect of his life. Years of practice had made him an excellent horseman, though he found little joy in the skill. Like so many things in his life, it was simply another tool, another way to maintain the distance he required between himself and a world that had never shown him much kindness. The collision, when it happened, was so perfectly orchestrated by fate that neither party could later claim to have planned it. Daphne, momentarily distracted by a particularly bold squirrel that seemed determined to investigate her reticule, stepped slightly off the main path, just as Simon's horse shied at a sudden noise from the nearby carriage road. Neither was in any real danger, but the moment stretched long enough for their eyes to meet. Simon's immediate concern for her welfare was evident in the way he quickly dismounted, approaching with a sort of respectful urgency that spoke well of his character. Daphne's composure in the face of what could have been a frightening experience revealed the steady nature that lay beneath her gentle exterior. "I do apologize," Simon said, his voice carrying the cultured tones of someone educated in the finest schools, but warmed by genuine concern. "Are you quite all right? My horse can be somewhat unpredictable when startled." "Perfectly well, thank you," Daphne replied, smoothing her skirts more from habit than necessity. "I'm afraid I wasn't paying sufficient attention to my surroundings. The fault was entirely mine." They stood there for a moment, each taking the measure of the other with the sort of careful assessment that comes naturally to people accustomed to reading social situations quickly and accurately. Simon saw a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence, whose first instinct had been to accept responsibility rather than assign blame. Daphne observed a gentleman whose immediate concern for her well-being seemed entirely genuine, whose expensive clothes were worn with the careless ease of someone born to them rather than aspiring to them. "Perhaps," Simon said, after a pause that was comfortable rather than awkward, "you might allow me to ensure your safe return to wherever you were heading. It seems the least I can do after my horse's poor behavior." The offer was perfectly proper, made in full view of her maid and any number of other park visitors. Yet, something in his tone suggested it was more than mere politeness. Daphne found herself curious about this stranger, who seemed somehow familiar, though she was certain they'd never been introduced. "That's very kind," she said, "though I was simply meeting a friend by the water. Nothing that requires an escort, though I do appreciate the offer." Simon nodded, understanding the gentle refusal for what it was, while also noting that she hadn't dismissed him entirely. In other circumstances, he might have taken his leave immediately, but something about this particular young woman made him reluctant to walk away quite so quickly. "Then, perhaps," he said, "you might allow me to walk with you that far. I find myself with time to spare, and the company would be most welcome." It was Daphne's turn to pause, though her hesitation had nothing to do with propriety, and everything to do with the unexpected flutter in her chest. She prided herself on her level-headed approach to life, her ability to think clearly in any situation. Yet this stranger had managed to unsettle her equilibrium with nothing more than a simple request and a pair of remarkably expressive dark eyes. "I would be delighted," she heard herself saying, though a part of her mind wondered where such boldness had come from. They began walking together, their pace unhurried, and their conversation flowing with surprising ease. Simon found himself genuinely interested in her observations about the park, the way she noticed details that others might miss, the pattern of light through the leaves, the way different birds seemed to prefer different areas, her amusement at the social hierarchies that played out even among the park's regular visitors. Daphne, for her part, was struck by how carefully he listened, how his questions suggested genuine curiosity rather than mere politeness. Most gentlemen of her acquaintance seemed to view conversation with young ladies as a necessary social ritual to be endured rather than enjoyed. This man appeared to actually value her thoughts, a novelty that was both flattering and slightly unsettling. As they approached the area where she was to meet Penelope, both realized, with some surprise, how quickly the time had passed. The conversation that had begun as a courtesy had evolved into something more substantial, though neither was quite ready to acknowledge what that might mean. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced," Daphne said, as they paused near a particularly lovely grove of trees. "I'm Miss Daphne Bridgerton." "Simon Bassett," he replied with a slight bow. "Duke of Hastings." The title hung in the air between them, changing nothing and everything simultaneously. Daphne felt a small flutter of something that might have been nervousness, though she couldn't quite identify why. Simon watched her face carefully, wondering if the revelation of his rank would alter her demeanor the way it so often did with others. But Daphne simply smiled, the same genuine expression she'd worn throughout their conversation. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Your Grace. Thank you for ensuring my safe passage through the park." In that moment, Simon realized that Miss Daphne Bridgerton was going to prove far more dangerous to his carefully ordered life than any horse could ever be. The gentle breeze carried the scent of early roses as Simon and Daphne continued their impromptu promenade. Neither seemed particularly eager to reach their destination, though both would have denied any reluctance if asked directly. There was something about the rhythm of their steps, the way their conversation flowed like water over smooth stones, that made the outside world feel temporarily suspended. "I confess," Daphne said, adjusting her parasol to better shade her face, "I hadn't expected to find such pleasant company during what I intended to be a solitary walk. London can feel rather overwhelming at times, particularly when one is preparing for the social season." Simon glanced at her profile, noting the slight tension around her eyes that her composed expression couldn't quite hide. "The season can indeed be rather intense," he agreed carefully, "though I imagine it must be especially so for someone making their debut. The expectations alone would be enough to discourage most people." "You speak as though you have some experience with such pressures," Daphne observed, turning to meet his gaze. "Though I suppose a duke must face his own particular set of social obligations." There was something in her tone that suggested genuine interest, rather than the calculating curiosity he'd grown accustomed to from others. Most people asked about his title with barely concealed avarice, already calculating what advantages might be gained from his acquaintance. Miss Bridgerton seemed more interested in understanding than exploiting. "Indeed," Simon said after a moment, "though I suspect my obligations pale in comparison to what you'll face in the coming weeks. At least, I have the luxury of choosing which events to attend. A young lady making her debut has considerably fewer options." They paused beside a small, ornamental pond where several ducks had gathered, apparently hoping for breadcrumbs from passers-by. Daphne watched them with amusement, noting how they positioned themselves strategically around the water's edge. "Even the ducks understand social positioning," she said, with a soft laugh. "See how that larger one has claimed the spot nearest the path? He knows that's where the best opportunities will present themselves." Simon followed her gaze, surprised by the observation. "Rather like a ballroom, I suppose. Though I'd venture to say the ducks are probably more honest about their intentions." "Oh, undoubtedly," Daphne agreed. "A duck who wants bread simply approaches and hopes for the best. They don't pretend to be interested in the philosophical implications of pond management, while secretly eyeing the crumbs." The comment drew a genuine laugh from Simon, the first he could remember producing in weeks. There was something refreshing about her directness, the way she could make astute observations without seeming cynical. Most people in their circle had long since lost the ability to find humor in social absurdities without becoming bitter about them. "You have a rather unique perspective on society, Miss Bridgerton," he said. "I suspect you'll navigate the season more successfully than you realize." "That's kind of you to say, though I'm not entirely certain success is what I'm hoping for," Daphne replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder if what society considers a successful season and what would actually make one happy are entirely different things." The comment hung between them, more revealing than she'd perhaps intended. Simon found himself studying her face, recognizing something of his own ambivalence toward social expectations. Here was someone who understood the difference between playing a role and living authentically, even if she hadn't yet determined how to reconcile the two. "That's a rather profound observation," he said carefully, "though I suspect most people would argue that happiness and social success are naturally aligned. Most people haven't spent much time thinking about what happiness actually requires," Daphne said, then immediately looked slightly embarrassed by her boldness. "Forgive me, that sounded rather presumptuous. I don't mean to suggest that I have any special wisdom about such matters." "Not presumptuous at all," Simon assured her. "In fact, I find myself agreeing with you completely. There's often a significant gap between what we're told should make us happy and what actually does. They resumed walking, their conversation having taken on a more intimate quality, despite the public setting. Both seemed surprised by how easily they'd moved beyond social pleasantries into more substantial territory. For Daphne, it was rare to find someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, rather than merely waiting for their turn to speak. For Simon, the novelty of conversing with someone who didn't appear to want anything from him was almost disorienting. "May I ask you something?" Daphne said, as they approached a particularly lovely section of the park where the trees formed a natural canopy overhead. "Of course. What brought you back to London? I have the impression you've been away for some time." It was a perfectly reasonable question, the sort that might naturally arise in conversation between new acquaintances. Yet Simon felt the familiar tightening in his chest that always accompanied inquiries into his personal history. The truth was too complicated, too painful to share with someone he'd known for less than an hour. "Family obligations," he said simply, "the sort that can't be indefinitely postponed, no matter how much one might wish otherwise." Daphne heard the carefully neutral tone and recognized it for what it was. She'd grown up with brothers who were masters of deflection when they didn't wish to discuss something. The skill to redirect conversation away from uncomfortable topics was one she understood well. "Ah," she said lightly, "those can be the most binding obligations of all, can't they? The ones that stem from duty rather than desire." "Precisely," Simon replied, grateful for her understanding. "Though, I suppose that's simply part of being an adult, learning to balance what we want with what's expected of us." "And do you find that balance achievable?" Daphne asked, then immediately shook her head. "I'm sorry, that's far too personal a question for someone I've just met. My mother would be horrified by my lack of proper restraint." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Simon said with a smile. "Though I don't mind the question. The answer is that I'm still working on that particular challenge. Some days are more successful than others." They'd reached the area where Penelope was meant to be waiting, though Daphne noticed with a mixture of relief and disappointment that her friend hadn't yet arrived. Part of her wanted to extend this unexpected encounter, while another part recognized the wisdom in ending it before she said something truly inappropriate. "It appears my friend has been delayed," she observed, glancing around the immediate area. "Though I suspect she'll arrive shortly. She's usually quite punctual." Simon nodded, understanding that this was likely where their paths would diverge. The rational part of his mind suggested this was for the best. Miss Bridgerton was clearly a young woman of quality, the sort who would be expecting marriage proposals and social advancement. He was neither looking for nor capable of providing either. Yet, something about her made him reluctant to simply walk away. Perhaps it was the way she'd listened to his carefully worded responses without pressing for details he wasn't prepared to share. Or maybe it was how she'd managed to make him laugh without seeming to try. Whatever the reason, he found himself searching for a way to extend their acquaintance without appearing improper. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "you might allow me the pleasure of calling on you sometime soon. If your family would find such a visit acceptable, of course." The suggestion was perfectly proper, exactly the sort of thing that might follow from a chance meeting in the park. Yet both of them understood that it represented something more significant than mere social courtesy. Daphne felt that flutter in her chest again, stronger this time, while Simon surprised himself with how much he hoped she would agree. "I believe that would be quite acceptable," Daphne replied, proud of how steady her voice remained, despite the rapid beating of her heart. We're in Grosvenor Square, number 5. Though I should warn you that my family can be rather overwhelming. We tend to be a rather boisterous group. I look forward to meeting them, Simon said, and realized he meant it. Though I suspect any family that produced someone as thoughtful as you can't be too overwhelming. The compliment was delivered so naturally that it took Daphne a moment to fully process it. When she did, she felt warmth spread through her chest, the sort of pleasant sensation that came from receiving genuine appreciation rather than empty flattery. That's very kind of you to say, Your Grace. Though I suspect you may revise that opinion after spending an evening with my brothers. They have a tendency to treat every dinner conversation as if it were a parliamentary debate. Sounds invigorating, Simon said with genuine interest. I've grown rather tired of conversations that never venture beyond the weather and the latest gossip. A family that actually discusses ideas sounds refreshing. Before Daphne could respond, she spotted a familiar figure approaching through the trees. Penelope Featherington was hurrying toward them, her distinctive red hair catching the afternoon light. Daphne felt a complex mix of emotions at her friend's arrival. Relief that Penelope was safe, slight disappointment that her time with the Duke was ending, and a flutter of nervousness about how she would explain this encounter. There's my friend, she said, gesturing toward Penelope. Miss Featherington. We've known each other since childhood. Simon followed her gaze, noting the young woman's approach. Then, I should take my leave and allow you to enjoy your visit. Thank you for the pleasure of your company, Miss Bridgerton. I do hope we'll have occasion to speak again soon. As do I, Your Grace, Daphne replied, offering her hand for him to bow over. The brief contact sent an unexpected shock through both of them, though neither allowed their surprise to show. As Simon walked away, leading his horse back toward the riding path, Daphne found herself watching his retreating figure with more interest than was probably proper. There had been something about him, something that went beyond mere good manners or attractive appearance. He'd made her feel heard in a way that was entirely new to her experience. Daphne! Penelope called as she drew near, slightly out of breath from her hurried walk. I'm so sorry I'm late. Mama insisted on changing her mind about my dress 3 times before she'd let me leave the house. It's quite all right, Daphne said, turning to greet her friend with a smile. I found ways to occupy my time. Was that the Duke of Hastings I saw you speaking with? Penelope asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. However did you come to make his acquaintance? He's supposed to be quite elusive when it comes to social functions. Daphne felt heat rise in her cheeks, though she couldn't quite explain why. We encountered each other quite by accident. His horse was startled, and we nearly collided. He was kind enough to ensure I wasn't injured. How romantic, Penelope exclaimed, then immediately looked embarrassed by her enthusiasm. I mean, how fortunate that he was such a gentleman about it. Not everyone would have taken such care. Indeed, Daphne agreed, though she found herself thinking that romantic might not be entirely the wrong word. There had been something about the encounter that felt different from her usual social interactions, though she wasn't quite ready to examine what that might mean. As they began their walk around the pond, Penelope chattering about the latest news from her household, Daphne found her thoughts drifting back to her conversation with the Duke. Something about the way he'd listened, really listened, to what she was saying. The way he'd seemed to understand her observations about the gap between social expectations and personal happiness. Most men of her acquaintance seemed to view conversations with young ladies as a necessary prelude to more important matters. But the Duke had appeared genuinely interested in her thoughts, had even built upon her observations, rather than simply acknowledging them politely before changing the subject. It was, she realized. The first time she'd ever felt intellectually appreciated by someone outside her immediate family. The sensation was both flattering and slightly unsettling. She'd grown accustomed to being valued for her beauty, her family connections, her potential as a wife and mother. But this stranger had seemed most interested in her mind, her ability to see beyond surface appearances. The afternoon continued with their usual activities, visiting the ducks, discussing the latest books they'd read, sharing observations about the other park visitors. Yet throughout it all, Daphne found herself distracted, her mind returning again and again to those dark eyes and that unexpected smile. When it was time to part ways, Penelope couldn't resist one more comment about the morning's encounter. "I do hope the Duke remembers his promise to call," she said, with a meaningful look. "It would be such a shame if such an interesting meeting came to nothing." "I'm sure he was simply being polite," Daphne replied, though something in her voice suggested she hoped otherwise. Gentlemen often make such offers without any real intention of following through. But as she walked home to Bridgerton House, she found herself hoping that Simon Bassett might prove to be different from other gentlemen in more ways than one. There had been something in his eyes when he'd asked permission to call, something that suggested genuine interest rather than mere social obligation. The thought both thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. Thrilled and terrified her. And the evening air in Bridgerton House carried the gentle bustle of a family preparing for dinner. Daphne sat at her dressing table, watching her reflection as Rose arranged her hair for the evening meal. The events of the afternoon played through her mind like a favorite melody, each moment distinct, yet flowing seamlessly into the next. She could still feel the warmth of the Duke's genuine laughter, the way his eyes had focused on her with an intensity that made her feel as though she were the only person in the entire park. "You seem rather thoughtful this evening, miss," Rose observed, securing a final pin in Daphne's dark locks. "Did you have a pleasant walk with Miss Featherington?" "Quite pleasant, thank you," Daphne replied, though her mind was far from thoughts of Penelope. Instead, she found herself wondering what the Duke might be doing at this very moment. Was he perhaps thinking of their conversation as well? The possibility sent a flutter through her chest that she couldn't quite suppress. Downstairs, the familiar chaos of a Bridgerton family dinner was already beginning. Anthony's voice carried up the stairs as he regaled someone with what sounded like a tale of his latest business venture. Benedict's laughter followed, the sort of warm sound that meant one of his brothers had said something particularly ridiculous. Violet's gentle corrections to young Hyacinth drifted through the air like background music. Daphne descended the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the polished banister. The house felt the same as it had that morning, yet something fundamental had shifted in her world. She couldn't quite name what had changed, only that the afternoon had left her with a sense of possibility she hadn't felt before. "Ah, there's our Daphne," Anthony said as she entered the drawing room where the family had gathered before dinner. "You look rather contemplative. Everything well?" "Perfectly well, thank you," she replied, settling into her usual chair near the window. "I simply had an interesting afternoon." "Interesting how?" Benedict asked, looking up from the sketch he'd been working on. "Did Penelope finally convince you to sample those dreadful cakes at Gunter's that she's always raving about?" "Nothing so dramatic," Daphne said with a smile. "I simply met someone new during my walk, the Duke of Hastings." The effect of her words was immediate and pronounced. Anthony's eyebrows rose sharply. Benedict's pencil stopped mid-stroke, and even Violet looked up from her needlework with sudden interest. The name, Simon Bassett, carried weight in their social circle, though not always for reasons that inspired confidence. "Hastings?" Anthony repeated, his voice carrying a note of concern. "How exactly did you come to make his acquaintance? He's not known for seeking out social interactions, particularly with young ladies making their debut." "It was entirely by chance," Daphne explained, feeling suddenly defensive, though she couldn't quite say why. "His horse was startled while I was walking, and we nearly collided. He was kind enough to ensure I wasn't injured and offered to walk with me to where I was meeting Penelope." "How very gallant of him," Violet said thoughtfully. "Though I must say, I'm rather surprised. The Duke has quite the reputation for avoiding such encounters. Not in any scandalous way, you understand. Simply that he seems to prefer his own company to that of society. Perhaps he's simply selective about the company he keeps," Daphne suggested, then immediately wondered why she felt compelled to defend someone she'd known for less than 2 hours. Benedict set down his sketch and regarded his sister with the sort of careful attention he usually reserved for studying a particularly challenging artistic subject. "You seem rather taken with this chance encounter, Daph. Was there something particularly noteworthy about the Duke's character?" The question was asked gently, without judgment, yet Daphne felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her family knew her well enough to recognize when something had affected her more than usual. The careful neutrality in Benedict's tone suggested he was trying to understand rather than tease. "He was thoughtful," she said finally. "Most gentlemen seem to view conversation with young ladies as a necessary social ritual. The Duke appeared genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was rather refreshing." Anthony exchanged a look with Benedict that didn't escape Daphne's notice. There was something in their expression that suggested concern, though she couldn't determine whether it was about the Duke specifically or about her obvious interest in him. "The Duke of Hastings is certainly an eligible gentleman," Violet said carefully, "though I believe he's made it rather clear that he has no intention of marrying. At least, that's what Lady Danbury mentioned the last time we spoke." "Marriage?" Daphne laughed, though the sound came out slightly higher than she'd intended. "Good heavens, we simply had a conversation in the park. I hardly think anyone need concern themselves with matrimonial implications after a single chance meeting." Yet, even as she spoke the words, she realized they rang somewhat hollow. There had been something about the Duke's manner, the way he'd looked at her when he'd asked permission to call, that suggested their encounter had been significant for him as well. The thought sent another flutter through her chest, stronger this time. "Of course not," Anthony said, though his tone remained watchful. "I simply think it wise to understand the character of any gentleman who might seek to court you, particularly one with Hastings' reputation." "What sort of reputation?" Daphne asked, suddenly alert. "You speak as though there's something concerning about his character." "Nothing concerning, precisely," Benedict interjected. "Simply that he's known to be rather solitary. He inherited the title quite young, under tragic circumstances, spent years abroad, and has made it clear that he considers marriage an unnecessary complication. Not the sort of gentleman one would typically expect to show interest in a debutante." The information settled over Daphne like a cloud passing over the sun. She found herself thinking of the careful way the Duke had chosen his words when she'd asked about his return to London, the slight tension she'd noticed when the conversation had touched on family obligations. Perhaps there was more to his story than she'd realized. "People can change," she said quietly. "Perhaps his circumstances have altered his perspective. Perhaps," Violet agreed, though her voice carried a note of maternal caution. Though it's always wise to be careful with one's heart, particularly when dealing with gentlemen who have made their intentions clear in the past. Haiti, dinner was announced before the conversation could continue, and the family moved to the dining room in their usual cheerful chaos. Yet, Daphne found herself distracted throughout the meal, her mind returning again and again to the afternoon's encounter and her family's unexpected reaction to it. She'd expected them to be pleased that she'd made the acquaintance of a duke, particularly who seemed genuinely interested in her company. Instead, their concerns suggested there were aspects of Simon Bassett's character that she hadn't yet discovered. The thought was both troubling and intriguing. What had happened in his past to earn him such a reputation for solitude? What tragic circumstances had shaped his view of marriage and family? Later that evening, as she prepared for bed, Daphne found herself standing at her window, looking out over the square toward the direction of Hastings House. Somewhere in the darkness, the Duke was likely engaged in his own evening routine, perhaps reading in his study or reviewing correspondence. Did he ever think of their conversation? Had it affected him as much as it had affected her? The questions circled through her mind as she settled into bed, the soft pillows and familiar comfort of her room, doing little to quiet her racing thoughts. She'd always prided herself on her level-headed approach to life, her ability to see situations clearly without being swayed by emotion. Yet one afternoon with Simon Bassett had left her feeling uncharacteristically unsettled. There had been something in his eyes when he'd looked at her, something that suggested depths she couldn't quite fathom. The careful control he seemed to maintain over himself, the way he'd deflected personal questions without being rude about it, the genuine warmth that had broken through his reserve when she'd made him laugh. All of it painted a picture of a man who was far more complex than he initially appeared. Perhaps that complexity was exactly what intrigued her. Most of the gentlemen she'd met moved through life with a predictable ease, their paths laid out by society and family expectations. But the Duke seemed to carry the weight of experiences that had shaped him in ways she couldn't yet understand. There was a mystery about him that called to something in her nature she hadn't known existed. The thought should have worried her more than it did. A sensible young woman preparing for her debut season would focus on gentlemen whose intentions were clear and whose character was well established. She should be thinking about the balls and parties that would begin in earnest soon, the careful dance of courtship that would determine her future. Instead, she found herself hoping that Simon Bassett would indeed follow through on his promise to call. Whatever secrets lay in his past, whatever had earned him his reputation for avoiding matrimony, she wanted to understand. There had been something in their conversation that felt unfinished, as though they'd only begun to scratch the surface of what might be possible between them. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of dark eyes and careful smiles, of conversations that felt like discoveries, and laughter that seemed to surprise the person producing it. In her dreams, the Duke's reserve melted away entirely, revealing someone warm and passionate beneath the controlled exterior. She woke with a strange sensation that she'd been given a glimpse of something precious, something worth pursuing, despite the warnings of her well-meaning family. The morning brought its usual routine, but Daphne found herself listening for sounds from the street below, wondering if perhaps the Duke might call earlier than expected. The rational part of her mind pointed out that proper gentlemen didn't make social calls before the appropriate afternoon hours, Yet she couldn't suppress the flutter of anticipation that accompanied every sound from outside. At breakfast, Anthony watched her with the sort of careful attention that suggested he'd been thinking about their conversation the previous evening. "Daphne," he said finally, "I hope you won't think me overbearing, but I feel I should mention that if the Duke does call, as he indicated he might, it would be appropriate for me to be present during your visit." "Of course," Daphne replied, though something in her rebelled at the idea of their conversation being monitored. There had been something about her interaction with the Duke that felt precious, precisely because it had been private, unobserved, free from the constraints of formal social expectations. "I don't mean to interfere," Anthony continued, clearly reading her expression. "Simply that it's important to maintain proper appearances, particularly when dealing with gentlemen whose intentions may not be entirely clear." "I understand," Daphne said, and she did, even if she didn't particularly like it. Her brother's protectiveness came from love and concern for her welfare, yet she couldn't help but feel that his presence would change the dynamic of any conversation she might have with the Duke, would make it impossible to recapture the easy intimacy they'd somehow achieved during their walk in the park. The day passed with unusual slowness, each hour feeling longer than it should have. Daphne attempted to occupy herself with her usual activities: reading, needlework, helping her mother with household correspondence. Yet she found her attention wandering constantly, her ears attuned to every sound from the street that might herald a visitor's arrival. By late afternoon, she'd begun to wonder if perhaps her family had been right to express caution. Perhaps the Duke's promise to call had been nothing more than polite courtesy, the sort of thing gentlemen said without any real intention of following through. The thought brought a disappointment that was sharper than she'd expected, revealing just how much she'd been anticipating his visit. Then, just as she was beginning to resign herself to the possibility that he wouldn't come, Henderson appeared in the drawing room doorway with the sort of formal expression that announced an important visitor. "The Duke of Hastings to see you, Miss Bridgerton," he announced, and Daphne felt her heart leap in a way that would have alarmed her if she'd been paying attention to anything other than the tall figure who followed Henderson into the room. Simon entered with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being welcomed in the finest homes. Yet there was something in his eyes as they met hers that suggested nervous anticipation. He'd come, despite whatever reputation he might have for avoiding such visits. Whatever his usual practice might be, he'd made an exception for her, and the knowledge sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Your Grace," she said, rising to greet him with what she hoped was appropriate composure. "How lovely to see you again." "Miss Bridgerton," he replied, bowing over her hand in the same manner that had affected her so strongly the day before. "Thank you for receiving me. I hope I haven't called at an inconvenient time." "Not at all," Daphne assured him, gesturing toward the seating area near the window. "Please, do make yourself comfortable. I believe my brother will join us shortly." She saw something flicker across his expression at the mention of Anthony, though whether it was disappointment or relief, she couldn't determine. The formal requirements of proper courtship meant they wouldn't have the privacy they'd enjoyed in the park. Yet his presence here suggested that whatever his usual practice might be, he was willing to navigate social conventions for the sake of continuing their acquaintance. As they settled into chairs facing each other, Daphne felt the same electric awareness she'd experienced during their walk. Even in the familiar surroundings of her family's drawing room, with the sounds of household activity drifting in from other parts of the house, Simon Bassett managed to make the space feel intimate simply by focusing his complete attention on her. "I trust you had a pleasant evening after our meeting yesterday," he asked, his tone formally polite, yet warm enough to suggest genuine interest. "Quite pleasant, thank you," Daphne replied. "Though I must confess, our conversation left me rather thoughtful. It's not often one encounters someone with such interesting perspectives on social expectations." "Ah," Simon said with a slight smile. "Then, I'm not the only one who found our discussion memorable. I've been thinking about your observations regarding the difference between social success and personal happiness. Rather profound insights for someone preparing for their debut season." Before Daphne could respond, Anthony appeared in the doorway, his expression politely welcoming, but watchful. The change in atmosphere was immediate and unmistakable. What had felt like an intimate conversation between two people discovering mutual interest suddenly became a formal social call, with all the constraints that implied. "Your Grace," Anthony said, entering the room with the sort of measured courtesy that established both welcome and boundaries. "Anthony Bridgerton, a pleasure to make your acquaintance." "Lord Bridgerton," Simon replied, rising to offer a respectful bow. "Thank you for receiving me. I hope you won't think it presumptuous of me to call after such a brief acquaintance with your sister." "Not at all," Anthony said, settling into a chair that placed him in clear sight of both Daphne and the Duke. "Any friend of Daphne's is welcome in our home. Though I confess, we don't often have the pleasure of entertaining visitors with your reputation for discretion in social matters." The comment was perfectly polite, yet it carried an undertone that made Daphne stiffen slightly. Her brother was probing, trying to understand the Duke's intentions without being overtly rude about it. Simon, for his part, seemed to recognize the protective instinct behind the words and responded with equal courtesy. "I've found that meaningful conversation is often easier to achieve in smaller, more intimate settings," he replied smoothly. "Your sister has proven to be exceptionally thoughtful company. It's rare to encounter someone with such genuine insights into the complexities of social expectations." Anthony's eyebrows rose slightly, and Daphne felt heat flood her cheeks. There was something about the way the Duke spoke of her that suggested their conversation had affected him more than a casual encounter should have. The knowledge was both thrilling and slightly terrifying. "Daphne has always been the most perceptive member of our family," Anthony said with genuine warmth. "Though I confess, I'm curious about what might have prompted such philosophical discussion during a chance meeting in the park." The question hung in the air, politely phrased, but clearly seeking information about the nature of their encounter. Daphne found herself holding her breath, wondering how the Duke would respond to what was essentially an interrogation disguised as social conversation. And so, our gentle tale draws to a close, like the last notes of a waltz fading into the quiet of a moonlit ballroom. We've walked alongside Daphne and Simon as they discovered something neither expected to find, a connection that transcended the careful boundaries of Regency society, a spark that promised to illuminate even the most guarded corners of their hearts. In their story, we find the timeless truth that love often arrives not with fanfare, but with the soft rustle of autumn leaves, the gentle meeting of eyes across a crowded room, the unexpected laughter shared between strangers who somehow feel like old friends. Their romance reminds us that the most profound connections begin not with grand declarations, but with genuine curiosity, with the simple courage to truly see another person. As you drift toward sleep, carry with you the warmth of their beginning, the promise of conversations yet to come, The gentle certainty that somewhere in the world, two hearts are always learning to recognize their match. Let their story remind you that love, when it's real, needs no rushing, no forcing, no desperate grasping. It simply unfolds, patient as morning light, persistent as spring returning to winter gardens. Rest now, knowing that tomorrow holds its own possibilities, its own chances for connection, its own quiet miracles waiting to be discovered. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with the gentle magic of hearts that dare to hope, to trust, and to love.